In this dream, overnight, Chicago changed. A city of steel and stories became something no one could explain. A piece of every nation appeared on every street. Cultures collided, languages intertwined, and the world gathered in one place. But beneath the beauty, something ancient began to stir. A sound rose from the ground, a summons few could hear, and fewer could understand. One man, a quiet janitor named Eli, holds the key to what's unfolding through Scripture. He sees what others cannot, that this gathering is not by chance, but by calling. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations. And then shall the end come. Matthew chapter 24, verse 14. This is the city of every nation, where prophecy meets the streets of Chicago, and truth calls every soul to choose. This story has to be told.
Chapter 1. The City That Changed Overnight. The morning light broke over Chicago with an unfamiliar glow, as if the sun itself had risen through 1,000 windows from 1,000 nations. The streets looked the same yet different, their corners reshaped by unseen hands. Where once stood a neighborhood diner now rose a small tea house with Arabic script on its sign, and across from it, a narrow cobblestone lane led to a red gate like those found in ancient Beijing. The air was thick with spices, incense, and the sounds of many tongues. The people moved about in wonder, some clutching phones to capture what their eyes could not explain, others standing still, whispering prayers. By noon, the city was unrecognizable. From the south side to the Gold Coast, every block reflected a fragment of another world. Churches with steeples stood beside temples with bells, mosques beside synagogues, murals beside calligraphy. The old skyline of Chicago still loomed, but now it was adorned with towers and domes from faraway lands. Those who walked the streets that day felt both awe and unease, for it was as though every culture had been gathered into one place without warning. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was judgment. A few believed it was a sign of the end times. Among them was a quiet man named Eli, a janitor who lived on the west side. He had spent the early morning on his knees, reading his worn Bible by the window. When he stepped outside, he felt a stillness deep within his spirit. The world around him had changed, but something in the air reminded him of the words from Matthew chapter 24 verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Eli looked around at the people of every tribe and tongue walking past him. He could hear laughter, arguments, and songs in languages he had never known, yet his heart trembled. He remembered the verse from Acts chapter 17 verse 26, and hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth. He whispered it aloud, not knowing why tears filled his eyes. Perhaps this gathering was not meant for confusion, but for revelation. As night fell, a soft wind moved through the streets. Lanterns flickered in every color, and in the distance, the sound of a trumpet echoed faintly. Eli turned toward the sound, his heart stirring. The city was alive, breathing, speaking in many voices. But somewhere beyond the beauty, something watched. He could feel it, though he could not see it. The merging of nations had come with more than light, it had come with a test. And though no one yet understood what was happening, the heavens did. For in that hour, Chicago had become the city of every nation, a reflection of the world's heart, waiting for truth to be revealed. Chapter 2. The Sound Beneath the City. That night, the city did not sleep. The streets pulsed with voices, music, and movement as though the nations themselves were breathing in rhythm. Yet beneath the surface of celebration and curiosity, there was a strange vibration, a hum that no one could place. It was not heard with the ears but felt in the bones, a low and steady sound rising from the depths of the ground. The elders said it was the trains beneath the city. The scientists said it was a magnetic disturbance. But Eli knew better. He awoke at 3 in the morning to the sound of his Bible pages fluttering though no wind had entered his room. The lamp beside his bed flickered as though uncertain whether to stay lit. When Eli reached for the word, his eyes fell on Psalm chapter 46 verse 6. The heathen raged, the kingdoms were moved, he uttered his voice, the earth melted. The verse sent a chill through his spirit. He closed his eyes and prayed for understanding, asking the Lord if this merging of nations was divine gathering or dangerous deception. Outside, the hum grew stronger. People across the city began to feel it, the taxi driver waiting at a red light, the nurse on her late shift, the man closing his corner store in Pilsen. Each paused, confused by a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Some heard whispers woven into the vibration, words they could not understand but somehow recognized in their hearts. Others heard silence that pressed on their souls like a warning. Eli walked toward the window and looked out across the skyline. The Willis Tower stood tall, but its shadow stretched unnaturally far, bending toward the river as if pointing at something unseen. Down below, lights flickered in patterns, some claimed to see them form the shape of a great circle, others a gate. Eli opened his Bible again, his trembling hand resting on 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 4. In whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. He realized then that what was rising beneath the city was not merely sound but a stirring, spiritual and ancient. Chicago had become a mirror of the nations, and mirrors could reflect truth or deceive with illusions. The merging of every language and people had opened a door. What had entered was still unclear. By dawn, reports filled the news. Statues in Millennium Park glowed faintly. The waters of Lake Michigan had turned unusually still, reflecting the city lights as if the heavens had bent down to look upon the earth. Tourists gathered at Navy Pier to watch, unaware that they were standing upon sacred ground. Eli put on his old work jacket, tucked his Bible into the inside pocket, and stepped out into the cool morning air. Whatever this was, he knew one thing: God was not silent. The city was being called to listen. For the hum beneath the ground was not only sound, it was a summons. And those with ears to hear would soon find out who, or what, was calling. Chapter 3. The Gathering at the River. Morning broke with a light that shimmered like glass upon the surface of Lake Michigan. Word had spread throughout the city, the waters had begun to move against the wind, flowing inward instead of out. Crowds gathered along the shoreline, drawn not by fear, but by something deeper, something pulling at the spirit. People of every nation stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces turned toward the lake as though expecting an answer. Eli stood among them, his Bible pressed to his chest. He had followed the tug in his heart from the west side all the way to the water's edge. Around him, he heard prayers in many tongues, songs in unfamiliar melodies, and the murmurs of children pointing toward the rippling surface. The reflection of the city wavered across the lake like a living thing, the skyline bending and shifting in ways that made the crowd gasp. It was as if Chicago itself was breathing, whispering through the waves. A woman beside Eli began to cry. She was dressed in white, her voice trembling as she quoted Revelation chapter 17 verse 15. The waters which thou saw, where the horse sits, are peoples, and multitudes, and nations, and tongues. Her words carried on the wind, and many stepped back in awe. Eli turned toward her, but before he could speak, a low sound rose from the depths, the same hum that had haunted the night before. The lake quivered, and a ring of light began to spread across the surface, circling outward until it reached the pier. Phones came out to record, but most were too stunned to speak. The light grew brighter until it revealed shapes beneath the water, not shadows, but symbols. Some saw crosses, others saw eyes, some claimed to see their own reflections transformed. Eli fell to his knees, whispering, "Lord, what is this?" The answer came not as a voice, but as remembrance, bringing to mind Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 14. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. A great calm fell over the crowd. The wind stopped. The air thickened, as though heaven and earth had drawn close enough to touch. Then a child stepped forward, a boy no older than 10, wearing a small backpack and holding a single white stone. He walked past the barricades and into the shallow water, his feet leaving no mark. The police called out, but the boy did not turn. He raised the stone high and said in a voice that echoed across the waves, "He is coming." Panic rippled through the onlookers. Some fled, others dropped to their knees. Eli rose slowly, his eyes fixed on the boy, who now stood surrounded by light. The hum deepened, the sound of many nations murmuring in unison, yet not in chaos, but in harmony. It was as if every language had found a single truth to speak at once. Then, just as suddenly, the light vanished. The boy was gone. The waters grew still again. Reporters would later say it was a mirage, a trick of sound and sun. But Eli knew better. The stone, now resting at the water's edge, bore strange markings, symbols he had never seen before yet somehow understood. They spoke of covenant, of warning, of gathering. He turned his eyes to heaven and whispered Matthew chapter 24 verse 30, "And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven." The nations had gathered by the river, but not all who came had come to worship. For while many hearts sought light, others had come to claim power. And in the shadows beyond the crowd, unseen eyes watched the water with purpose. The city had become a stage, and the first act of revelation had just begun. Chapter 4. The Stranger from the South Side. The sun rose dim that morning, veiled by a gray mist that hung low over the skyline. The city was quiet, too quiet for Chicago. It was as if the streets themselves were waiting. News of the boy at the lake had spread through every neighborhood. Some said he was an angel, others said a messenger, but none could find him. The white stone he had carried now rested in a museum under heavy guard, though no one could read its markings. Eli returned to his janitorial route at a small high school on the south side, though his spirit was restless. The students spoke of the event in whispers, mixing scripture with rumor. One girl told her friend that her grandmother saw the boy walking near Halsted Street late that night, glowing like moonlight. Eli said nothing, but his hands trembled as he swept the halls. He had prayed for answers, but heaven had given him silence, or perhaps, waiting. As he left the building that evening, he noticed a man sitting on the church steps across the street. The stranger wore a long brown coat and carried nothing but a satchel. His skin was weathered, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes sharp yet gentle. When Eli drew near, the man spoke without turning his head. "You heard the hum too," he said. His voice was low, calm, almost melodic. Eli froze. You know about the sound? He asked. The stranger nodded slowly. It's not just under the city, he said, looking up toward the clouds. It's above us, around us, within us. The nations are gathering, not by man's plan, but by God's allowance. And when nations gather, so do spirits. Eli's breath caught. Who are you? The man smiled faintly. Just a traveler, he said, from a place where the lines between heaven and earth grow thin. He stood, revealing a simple wooden cross hanging from his neck, carved with ancient lettering. My name is Malik. Some call me Watcher. The name stirred something deep within Eli's spirit. He recalled Hebrews chapter 13 verse 2. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. He opened his Bible, unsure what to say, but Malik continued before he could speak. Do not fear what has come, the stranger said, but understand it. This city is a mirror, Eli. Every nation reflected, every heart revealed. The boy at the river was not the beginning, only the sign. The true test is coming, the choosing between truth and counterfeit light. The words pierced Eli's soul. Then what must I do? He asked. Malik looked out toward the city, where the lights flickered like stars trying to speak. You must walk, he said softly. You must go where the sound leads. There is a place beneath this city, older than its foundations. What began in water will rise in fire. Eli followed his gaze, feeling the hum stir again beneath his feet. It was stronger now, almost like a heartbeat. When he looked back, the stranger was gone, leaving only the faint scent of myrrh in the air and a folded piece of parchment on the church step. Unfolding it, Eli found a single verse written in careful hand. Isaiah chapter 60 verse 2. For, behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the people, but the Lord shall arise upon thee, and his glory shall be seen upon thee. As night fell over the south side, Eli knew his life was no longer ordinary. The city that once raised him had become a map of heaven and hell, light and shadow. The hum beneath Chicago was calling him deeper, and whatever waited below was watching for his answer.